Hi, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us tonight. These are unprecedented and interesting times. Events unfold and change by the minute. And as the days go by, we watch as our leaders cope with relentless march of this virus and disease.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Angeles, and we welcome our viewers here and around the world for the headlines.
The Philippine government on Saturday thanked the Iglesia ni Cristo Executive Minister for allowing the use of the whole Ciudad de Victoria complex in Bulacan to house coronavirus patients as well as the frontliners, including the healthcare workers who will be treating them.
China pays homage to coronavirus victims.
Americans are urged to wear masks as the virus toll mounts around the world. The Philippine government on Saturday thanked the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ Executive Minister for allowing the use of the whole Ciudad de Victoria complex in Bulacan to house coronavirus patients as well as the frontliners, including the healthcare workers who will be treating them. Let's listen in.
111 rooms for our frontliners. Diyos mabalas po sa Indo, Gabos. Yesterday, we received more positive news when we learned that our brothers in the Iglesia ni Cristo have agreed to let the government use the whole Ciudad de Victoria estate. Not just the Philippine Arena itself, but the entire estate, to isolate and quarantine COVID-19 cases. So kasama po dito ang Philippine Arena, ang Philippine Sports Stadium, at ang Garden Suites. There will be facilities not just for patients, but for our frontliners. Once again, once everything is ready, the whole complex will have an estimated 1,065 rooms for patients, while frontliners will be able to share 476 suites, good for 2 to 4 health workers each. Maraming salamat po, Ka Eduardo Manalo.
Earlier, the government said it is also readying the forums and halls of the Philippine International Convention Center, the World Trade Center, and the Rizal Memorial Coliseum to house COVID-19 cases with mild symptoms. The government is also receiving offers from other private facilities, while noting with sadness that some had rejected government's request to house COVID-19 cases.
The U.S. government begins advising people to wear masks if they go outside, pointing to the research that shows the coronavirus could spread just by breathing. Watch this.
So the CDC is announcing additional steps Americans can take to defend against the transmission of the virus. From recent studies, we know that the transmission from individuals without symptoms is playing a more significant role in the spread of the virus than previously understood. So you don't seem to have symptoms and it still gets transferred. In light of these studies, the CDC is advising the use of non-medical cloth face covering as an additional voluntary public health measure. So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. They suggest it for a period of time. But this is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it, but you have a lot of ways you can look at it as follows. The CDC is recommending that Americans wear a basic cloth or fabric mask. They can be either purchased online or simply made at home, probably material that you'd have at home. These face coverings can be easily washed or reused. I want to emphasize that the CDC is not recommending the use of medical grade or surgical grade masks, and we want that to be used for our great medical people that are working so hard and doing some job.
First of all, I want people to understand that the CDC, the World Health Organization, my office, and most public health and health organizations and professionals originally recommended against the general public wearing masks because based on the best evidence available at the time, it was not deemed that that would have a significant impact on whether or not a healthy person wearing a mask would contract COVID-19. We have always recommended that symptomatic people wear a mask because if you're coughing, if you have a fever, if you're symptomatic, you could transmit disease to other people. What has changed in our recommendation? Well, it's important to know that we now know from recent studies that a significant portion of individuals with coronavirus lack symptoms. They're what we call asymptomatic. And that even those who eventually become pre-symptomatic, meaning that they will develop symptoms in the future, can transmit the virus to others before they show symptoms. So I want to say if you do choose to wear a face mask, very important, wash your hands first because you don't want to put on a face covering with a dirty hand. Do not touch your face while you are wearing the face covering because, again, you could take materials from the surface, germs from the surface, and bring it to your face. If you choose to wear a face covering, please leave the N95 mask, the medical supplies for the medical professionals, healthcare workers, and frontline workers.
The announcement came after Anthony Fauci, who is leading the government's scientific response, backed recent scholarship that found SARS-CoV-2 can be suspended in the ultrafine mist let out when people exhale. Since the virus was first identified in China, health experts have said that it is primarily spread through coughing and sneezing. The World Health Organization has been more cautious, saying the airborne threat was only known to occur during certain medical treatments. More than 53,000 people have died from COVID-19 since it was first detected late last year in China. The United States on Thursday recorded 1,169 COVID-19 fatalities, the highest in one day in any country. According to a Johns Hopkins University tally, worse may be coming as a quarter of global infections are in the United States, where Trump has warned of a very, very painful first 2 weeks of April.
Meanwhile, China came to a standstill on Saturday to mourn patients and medical staff killed by the coronavirus, as the world's most populous country observed a nationwide 3-minute silence. Take a look. At 10 a.m. local time, citizens paused. Cars, trains, and ships sounded their horns, and air raid sirens rang out in memory of the more than 3,000 lives claimed by the virus in China. And in the capital's Tiananmen Square, the national flag flew at half-mast, surrounded by heavier than normal security. Pedestrians in one of the city's busiest shopping districts stopped walking and kept their heads low in a silent tribute ceremony, while police patrolling stood at the side of the road with their riot shields down and bowed heads. In Wuhan, the city where the virus first emerged late last year, sirens and horns also sounded as people fell silent in the streets. Some restrictions in Hubei have been eased in recent weeks after the officially stated number of new infections in China dropped to near zero.
World Health Program Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus stressed that the COVID-19 pandemic is much more than a health crisis and has profound social and economy consequences. He also lamented that there are reports from some countries that have an increase in domestic violence since the COVID-19 outbreak began. Watch this.
More than 1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 have now been reported to WHO, including more than 50,000 deaths. But we know that this is much more than a health crisis. We're all aware of the profound social and economic consequences of the pandemic. The restrictions many countries have put in place to protect health are taking a heavy toll on the income of individuals and families and the economies of communities and nations. Several countries are suspending user fees and providing free testing and care for COVID-19, regardless of a person's insurance, citizenship, or residence status. We encourage these measures. This is an unprecedented crisis which demands an unprecedented response.
What we need to absolutely ensure that if we want to transition back to a steady state with the virus, if we want to reach a point of disease control, we need to put in place the public health architecture. We need a massive investment in our capacity to do surveillance, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine. We need very good information systems. We need a highly educated, engaged and empowered communities around the world who understand what to do if they're sick, where to go, have access to a doctor, to a nurse, to testing, to isolation, to quarantine. And at the same time, we strengthen our healthcare system to deal with those who are very sick. Circumstances in which the use of masks, but homemade or cloth masks at community level, may help in an overall comprehensive response to this disease. And we will support governments in making those decisions based on the situation they find themselves in terms of transmission, based on the context in which they're dealing and the resources that they have at their disposal. But above all, we must ensure that our frontline health workers are the ones who are most exposed. They're the ones that need the high performance protection in order for them to stay healthy, do their jobs and save lives.
But what we need to better understand, and these will come through these natural history studies which are being conducted, of why are some people progressing from moderate disease to severe disease to critical disease? Why are some people progressing backwards from very severe disease to more moderate disease and recover? So these are really fundamental questions that we need to better understand so that we can improve our standard of care for anyone who is infected with this.
Sadly, there are reports from some countries of an increase in domestic violence since the COVID-19 outbreak began. We call on countries to include services for addressing domestic violence as an essential service that must continue during the COVID-19 response.
The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, declared a global economic recession as the spread of the new coronavirus has stunted economic activity across the globe. Watch this.
Never in the history of the IMF we have witnessed the world economy coming to a standstill. We are now in recession. It is way worse than the global financial crisis. And it is a crisis that requires all of us to come together. Saving lives and protecting livelihoods ought to go hand in hand. We cannot do one without the other. And in that spirit, we at the IMF are concentrated on making sure that there is a strong response to the health crisis as well as protecting the strength of the economy. We know that in flight to safety, a lot of capital has left the emerging economies, the developing world. Nearly $90 billion have flown out. This is way more than during the global financial crisis. And some countries are highly dependent on commodity exports. With prices collapsing, they're hit yet again. It is paramount for us to place these countries, and especially the weakest among them, in the center of our attention. The same way the virus hits vulnerable people with medical preconditions hardest, the economic crisis hits vulnerable economies the hardest. We have $1 trillion war chest, and we are determined to use as much as necessary in that protecting the economy from the scarring of this crisis. We are mobilizing emergency financing assistance to countries, and I can tell you we have never seen ever such a growing demand for emergency financing. Already over 90 countries have been placing requests to the IMF for it.
Half the
Our
world...
membership, our shareholders are saying, use everything you can use right now, fast. And that is the focus of our attention.
Half of the world's population has now been asked or ordered by their governments to stay at home to combat the spread of the new disease, with instructions to work remotely if possible. But the economy has already been sent into a tailspin, with governments pledging hundreds of billions of dollars to support companies and workers impacted by the pandemic. U.S. employment plunged by 701,000 in March, and the jobless rate surged to 4.4%. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Friday it would be a mistake for the U.S. to limit exports of medical supplies to Canada in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. His comments came hours after Minnesota manufacturing giant 3M was threatened punishment by President Trump for not shifting all distribution back home. Here's Thomas I. in likeness for the details.
We end the week in Canada with the Canadian government warning U.S. President Donald Trump not to stop the export of medical goods to other countries. Now, you recall that Trump had ordered 3M to stop exporting medical masks to Canada and Latin America. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded with this message.
And it would be a mistake to create blockages or reduce the amount of back and forth trade of essential goods and services, including medical goods, across our border. That is the point we're making very clearly to the American administration right now.
But does that mean Canada will retaliate and halt exports to the United States?
I am confident that the close and deep relationship between Canada and U.S. Will hold strong, and that we will not have to see interruptions in supply chain in either directions.
3M has indicated it will comply with Trump's order, but warned the president of the consequences. As the economic crisis from COVID-19 deepens, the cupboards at Canada's food banks are bare. Prime Minister Trudeau promised $100 million to restock those shelves.
Across the country, there are food banks that can help. But like most organizations, food banks are facing new challenges because of this pandemic. With everyone staying home, they have fewer volunteers. And a difficult economic climate means that they're receiving fewer donations that they normally would, while demand rises.
The Prime Minister urged those with the time and ability to help, to reach out to their local food bank and ask them how they can assist. As we continue to live through this pandemic, take care of others and take care of yourselves. Stay safe and stay tuned to Eagle News for accurate and balanced coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Edmonton, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Thomas. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announces that the EU is suspending import tariffs and taxes on medical equipment needed to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Watch this.
We're working on all fronts against coronavirus. This is an emergency situation that requires extraordinary action. Our hospitals, doctors and nurses need medical equipment such as ventilators or testing kits to treat patients and save lives. And they need equipment, masks, gloves, overalls to protect themselves from contamination. We need a lot of this equipment, and it can be expensive. And that is why today we accepted to eliminate for a while certain taxes on the import of medical devices and equipment from countries that are outside the European Union. This is good for hospitals and for charities, for example. This is our contribution to easing the pressure on prices for medical and protective equipment and to making them more affordable. To give you an example, in Italy, customs duty of 12% and a value-added tax of 22% is levied on some face masks or protective garments that we import from countries like China. Our decision will make them 1/3 cheaper. For ventilators, the average value-added tax rate is at 20%. This is a temporary measure, and it will apply for at least the next 4 months, or longer if necessary. We stand by our health workers and hospitals, and we will do all we can to help them further.
Eagle News, we'll be right back.
Alamin ang mga dapat at hindi dapat gawin ngayong panahon ng enhanced community quarantine dahil sa banta ng COVID-19. Anong uri ng transportasyon ang papayagan sa mga kalsada ngayong panahon ng quarantine? Mga P2P at shuttle service ng mga LGU, health worker at mga piling manggagawa. Transportasyon mula sa airport para sa mga OFW. Maaari ring maglakad o magbisikleta kung mamimili o kasama sa essential workforce. Tuloy-tuloy din ang daloy ng mga kargamento sa lupa, dagat at himpapawid. Maliban sa mga ito, walang pampublikong transportasyon ang papayagang bumiyahe sa kalsada. Hindi rin haharangan ang pagpasok ng mga cargo truck at van sa mga daungan at daanan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to!
The U.S. government has begun advising people to wear masks if they go outside, pointing to research that shows the coronavirus could be spread just by breathing. Take a look.
So the CDC is announcing additional steps Americans can take to defend against the transmission of the virus. From recent studies, we know that the transmission from individuals without symptoms is playing a more significant role in the spread of the virus than previously understood. So you don't seem to have symptoms and it still gets transferred. In light of these studies, the CDC is advising the use of non-medical cloth face covering as an additional voluntary public health measure. So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. They suggest it for a period of time, but this is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it, but you have a lot of ways you can look at it as follows. The CDC is recommending that Americans wear a basic cloth or fabric mask that can be either purchased online or simply made at home, probably material that you'd have at home. These face coverings can be easily washed or reused. I want to emphasize that the CDC is not recommending the use of medical grade or surgical grade masks, and we want that to be used for our great medical people that are working so hard and doing some job.
First of all, I want people to understand that the CDC, the World Health Organization, my office, and most public health and health organizations and professionals originally recommended against the general public wearing masks because based on the best evidence available at the time, it was not deemed that that would have a significant impact on whether or not a healthy person wearing a mask would contract COVID-19. We have always recommended that symptomatic people wear a mask because if you're coughing, if you have a fever, if you're symptomatic, you could transmit disease to other people. What has changed in our recommendation? Well, it's important to know that we now know from recent studies that a significant portion of individuals with coronavirus lack symptoms. They're what we call asymptomatic. And that even those who eventually become pre-symptomatic, meaning that they will develop symptoms in the future, can transmit the virus to others before they show symptoms. So I want to say if you do choose to wear a face mask, very important, wash your hands first because you don't want to put on a face covering with a dirty hand. Do not touch your face while you are wearing the face covering because, again, you could take materials from the surface, germs from the surface, and bring it to your face. If you choose to wear a face covering, please leave the N95 mask, the medical supplies for the medical professionals, healthcare workers, and frontline workers.
Specialist in the history of ideas and epidemiology, Kalina Gottman analyzes today's epidemic of COVID-19 and its effects on society, saying that this traumatic episode brings with it opportunity to create a new form of social fabric following increased examples of mutual help and care between neighbors. Watch this.
it's hugely traumatic. I think it's an enormous crisis. I think that it's a shock. I think the fact that for many of us finding ourselves in situations that we wouldn't have imagined a few weeks ago is a shock to the system. Not everyone is equally affected by the possibility of death in this case, but it does go across ages. And I think that that sense of vulnerability is also really bringing with it a new form of social fabric, a new form of mutual help, and a real sense of recognition, I think, of the need for some very basic forms of universal care. We can expect or imagine that there might be a real sense of a certain sort of exhaustion, but also a reorganization of our priorities. And I think that the fact that we're so attentive to the present and basic things like getting food or basic things like caring for family at home, although that brings a lot of tension, it's very difficult for all of us doing this care at home and having to look out after neighbors and such. I think that that adjustment is massive, and I think that it really can operate as a huge corrective. In the case of the 14th century events, people did try to go off and escape everything in the countryside, and then they would die there too, or whatnot. But they came back with force and with vigor into the streets, not long after. And I think that there's a certain sort of human, very fundamental need for contact that we have, and for connection and for touch that is going to go far beyond anything that we might be living through over this period of a few months. What we might find is, although some countries may retreat into an isolationism or a protectionism which antedates the current pandemic in any case, we might also find that there's much more of a sense of a need for another order of solidarity, and that actually it's not globalization that's the cause of this at all, but that the pandemic is really a result of gross inequality.
Meanwhile, people in Vancouver are cheering and staging a noisy show of appreciation for their health workers. Here's Kathleen Cruz.
7 p.m. used to be just a quiet night where people are spending their time resting after a day of work, or quietly eating supper at home. But with COVID-19 pandemic, 7 p.m. now devotes to appreciate first responders, doctors, nurses, and other frontline health workers risking their lives to fight the coronavirus. Firefighters, RCMP, and police are also joining the crowd by doing a parade and siren salutes around local hospitals during 7 p.m. for appreciation and support. While residents are grabbing out their pots and pans outside of their homes or balconies to make noises for all the work that the frontliners are doing during this COVID-19 pandemic. Whether it is clapping, shouting, or other banging, all of these gestures are clearly being appreciated by the health workers across the province of British Columbia. Restaurants and local businesses are also stepping up by providing free meals to first responders and healthcare workers during this unprecedented and challenging time. In Vancouver, British Columbia, Kathleen Cruz, Eagle News. Will live in interesting times.
Both the British Secretary of State, Matt Hancock, and Chief NHS Nurse Ruth may pay tribute to 2 nurses who passed away in the last 24 hours with coronavirus, proving the already under-pressure health system is at the front line of the battle against COVID-19. Hancock also announced during the daily briefing that 2 new Nightingale hospitals will be built in Bristol and Harrogate. Watch this.
3,605 people have sadly died. And we're reminded again today that for the NHS, this truly is the front line. In the last 24 hours, 2 nurses and 2 healthcare assistants have tragically died fighting coronavirus.
I want to recognise that today we have had the very sad news of the loss of 2 of my colleagues. We have lost today Amy Arouk and Anima Nasreen, 2 registered nurses working to protect our public, and they sadly have died. My sincere condolences to their families, their friends and their colleagues, because they were one of us. They were one of my profession, of the NHS family. But I'm very grateful to you, the British public, for your patience and in helping our NHS. As the Secretary of State said, this weekend is going to be very warm, and it is very tempting to go out and enjoy those summer rays. But please, I ask you to remember Amy and Arima. Please, stay at home for them.
First, we're delivering more critical care beds. This morning, I attended the opening of the new Nightingale Hospital in East London with Ruth and many others. It was planned, constructed and fully staffed in just 9 days. And that is an outstanding achievement. And I pay tribute to Ruth and all who've been involved in its construction. We have more Nightingale hospitals planned and on the way in Birmingham and Manchester and Glasgow. And today we've announced that we will begin the work on 2 further Nightingale hospitals in Bristol and Harrogate.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that while he has completed 7 days of isolation, he still has a high temperature, so will remain isolated until that returns to a normal level. And he's urging people to stick to the social distancing or physical distancing guidance for the coming weekend, despite a forecast of good weather. Take a look.
First of all, in my own case, although I'm feeling better and I've done my 7 days of isolation, alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature, and so in accordance with government advice, I must continue my self-isolation until that symptom itself goes. I reckon a lot of people will be starting to think that this is all going on for quite a long time, and they would rather be getting out there, and particularly if you've got kids in the household, everybody may be getting a bit stir crazy, and there may be just a temptation to get out there, hang out, and start to break the regulations. And I just urge you not to do that. Please, please stick with the guidance now.
Vanessa Morel gave birth to her first child, Oliver, in a Madrid hospital separated from her husband after both parents tested positive for COVID-19. Today, reunited, the couple are counting the days until the end of their second isolation period when they'll be able to kiss and hold their son without gloves or a protective mask. Watch this.
Ese bebé, cógelo. Ay, ay, ay. Hola, Marta. Ay, por favor. Ay, 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 ay.
Hola. Hola, campeón. Que ya te vienes a casa, hijo. Que ya nos vamos a casa. Pero tienes un muñeco.
Pesa 3.540.
¿Sí?
¿Vale? Siempre pierden un poquito de peso estos días y lo recuperan los primeros 15 días o así, o sea que es normal. Y el que hemos tenido un poco castigado 2 días ahí sin comer hasta que le hemos cambiado la leche.
Voy a por una bata, es que no me han dado nada a mí.
Ay, tu hijo. Te lo presenta. Por favor, me dan ganas de llorar.
Ay, ay, muchas gracias
por favor, todo. Por favor. Es lo más bonito que me ha pasado desde que trabajo.
¿Has visto?
Sí, ay, es precioso.
Fue increíble.
Pues eso, es como otra vez sin fiesta también ese día.
Claro, porque es que realmente no le conocíamos. Habíamos visto vídeos, fotos, pero no es lo mismo. todo no es lo mismo. Nada, yo aún no he tocado a mi hijo sin los guantes. Y esa sensibilidad que notará con mamá o conmigo, pues estamos como locos porque termine para poder tocarle, darle un beso. O sea, no le hemos podido, o sea, es que no hemos podido hacerlo.
Es verdad que es duro, pero ¿qué va a pasar? Mira, ya Oliver tiene 15 días. Pues ya en nada va a tener un mes y ya saldremos a la calle, conocer a los abuelos, a los tíos. Y todo esto pues quedará en eso, en una pesadilla que habremos pasado.
A number of Londoners are making use of the limited time they are allowed to be out of their houses as the UK remains in lockdown in a bid to prevent the coronavirus from spreading further throughout the country. In general, Londoners agree with the extreme measure, although many appear concerned about what the future will hold and how they will cope financially. Take a look.
It's something I've never seen here. But I work locally, so I've come out here for a jog, and I'm quite shocked actually. I've never seen it this empty ever. This is like quintessentially London, quintessentially British. So it's crazy that it's so empty.
We're all on 0 hours contract, so we don't get paid, nothing. So right now we're all struggling financially, everyone. And we're still waiting for the 80% that they promised on our salary. We send all the letters, everything, we're still waiting for it. It's been like over a week. People are struggling, honestly.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, yeah, very worried about work and jobs and the economy and everything like that, and how long this will all go on for. Obviously, it's all being done for a very good reason. It has to be at the moment, but worried about the future as well.
Britain has unveiled measures for businesses and employees as the economy slumps. Britain has 3,605 deaths as the country remains under lockdown in an attempt to stem the outbreak. We'll take a short break. Eagle News will be right back.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Welcome back. In Japan, there were countermeasures, new coronavirus countermeasures that were introduced. Joining us live is Dennis Liu from our EBC Japan Bureau. Dennis.
Hi, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening from Manila. How are you? Good to hear from you.
We're okay here, Alma.
So what are your updates for us, Dennis?
New corona countermeasures meeting on data utilization launch. Minister of Economic Affairs and Finance, Yasutoshi Nishimura, who is in charge of countermeasures against the new coronavirus, announced today, April 4th, that it will launch a new joint public-private conference to discuss the use of data to help prevent the spread of infection. It is assumed that data will be provided and analyzed regarding the activities of infected people, and that such methods will be used to identify close contacts. The government has already asked cell phone companies, Google and Yahoo, and other major IT companies to provide unidentified data. The first meeting will be held on June 6 with relevant ministries and agencies as well as economic organizations and IT giants. The Minister of Finance told the Cabinet Office yesterday that reporters would develop technologies for infectious disease control as soon as possible. In other news, Japan government and Liberal Democratic Party agree on 300,000 yen handout over COVID-19 outbreak. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the main governing Liberal Democratic Party have agreed to give roughly about $2,800 to households whose income has fallen to a certain level because of the COVID-19. Yesterday, April 3rd, Friday, Prime Minister Abe and LDP Policy Chief Kishida Fumio agreed on the 300,000 yen cash handout as part of the discussions on an emergency economic package. Chief Kishida later told reporters that the amount was based in consideration of main factors like the average number of people in Japanese families. He mentioned to Abe that the amount must be provided promptly and that the Liberal Party is leaving the details of the amount distribution to the government. Kishida also mentioned that the LDP will continue to discuss this with the government about the size of the economic package and other responses to the coronavirus outbreak. Alma.
What would be the manner of distribution of the package?
Right. The manner of distribution, I believe, will be announced in the next few days. Alma?
So, also, Dennis, is it true that the facilities which had been set up for the Summer Olympics would also be used as facilities for the or housing for patients of COVID-19 or the coronavirus?
Yes. After the Olympics, all units will be sold to real estate buyers. In fact, some of the units have already prospect buyers, Alma. Example of this is the Athletes Village, which after the games will be available for rent or for sale to the public. Alma. And this is one of the reasons why the Olympic Committee here in Tokyo are hesitant to postpone the Olympics.
Okay. Just one more thing. I don't know if you came across this, but the governor of Tokyo, Koike, is pressuring Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to declare a state of emergency, sending a strong message to curb the outbreak. Do you have any information on this? If Prime Minister Abe would indeed declare a state of emergency, would he give in? As we know that Ms. Koike was the former environment minister, became defense minister too, but he resigned from the LDP of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So just a little bit of a background. But do you think Prime Minister Abe would declare a state of emergency?
Yes. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe did not declare a state of emergency, Alma.
So,
and yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Right. We will give you updates as this news progresses.
Okay. So, but Tokyo has the most number of coronavirus cases, right? In Japan.
That's right, Alma.
So, it's not as restrictive as they want it to be. But, ingat ka dyan, Dennis. Give us updates. Keep the updates coming and we'll be waiting. Thank you for your time, Dennis.
Yes, Alma, thank you. That's all for my updates now. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu for Eagle News International. We live in interesting times.
The members of the New Japan Philharmonic Orchestra prepare for their latest recital, but this is no ordinary performance. In a lyrical twist on the telework trend forced on the world by the coronavirus pandemic, they appear in tiny blocks on screen, recording their parts separately before technology brings them together in joyous harmony. Watch this.
音楽どころじゃない、音楽はいらないってやっぱりになるなっていう、それをこういうことになるたびに感じてきてて、ただ少し落ち着いてきた時にやっぱり音楽で励まされるんだっていう動きが必ず出てくるので、僕らはまた必要とされる時が来るだろうって。
普段何年も一緒に毎日音楽で同じ動画を聴きながら、弾いてるわけなので、絶対合うだろうと思ってたんですけど、全く合わなかったんですよね。半月ぶりにその機械で合わせたものとはいえ、みんなの音が重なって、30人40人重なってるところを聞いたんですけど、これ半月ぶりに聞くとほんとちょっと涙出てきそうなぐらい嬉しくて。
All right, let's head on over to Hawaii. Joining us live is Alfred Asenas. Alfred, what is the latest over there? Aloha.
Aloha, Alma. Let me explain this little piece of decoration later, okay? So let me just go by the numbers real quick.
Okay.
319 confirmed cases. Sadly, a third death has been announced earlier today. And another elderly man also here on Oahu. Now, here's some good news that we're trying to report consistently is that 78 have so far recovered, up from 72 yesterday. Now, in line with the Trump administration's announcement to wear a facial mask when in public, the Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell has done the same and continues to encourage to stay home as much as possible. So, and then meanwhile, Governor David Ige has also activated 250 members of the Hawaii National Guard to help medical health professionals in the distribution of critical supplies. As you know, there's the goal is to maintain some order, to be able to support the frontliners, so to speak. And given the, I guess, the anxiety and the uncertainty of shortages, it's just appropriate to have some reinforcements. In this case, on top of the law enforcement we already have, now you have some military personnel courtesy of Hawaii's National Guard. So that's the latest we have so far, Alma.
Okay, so Alfred, I don't want to be so negative at this time. I just want to ask, what are your plans after the COVID-19 situation?
Well, actually, after all this blows over, I mean, it's just going back to normal as soon as we're allowed to. First and foremost, the kids go back to school. Tess and I go back to work in our routine schedules, and just be out and about, because really the challenge for those of us who live here is not being outdoors. When a lot of the culture, a lot of the activities take place outside. Outside. So, but I just wanted to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're saying a lot of the activities are outside. So, How has life changed in Hawaii? Can you give me a picture of how it is now in Hawaii?
Just like what we see now in social media, a lot are using web technology, web conferencing to do work, to communicate. But you know what's interesting, living in the suburbs outside Honolulu. Yes, there's still some attempts to go jogging, to go walking. It's not going to go away. Again, you know, lifestyles here involve going outside.
Yes.
So it's, you know, the law enforcement arm will have to do what they have to do, you know, for everyone's safety. But you know, given the severity, especially outside Honolulu, it's not that bad yet. But of course, you know, a lot of residents don't want to take chances. We don't want to take chances ourselves.
Okay, so are you going to tell me what's up with the colorful lei?
Okay, just for everyone's knowledge, these are lei. This is not the real one. It's the floor ones, the real ones. Hawaii Bureau is celebrating its 7th anniversary this month of April. Okay, it is around this time 7 years ago. We were scrambling to create a crew and produce a story of some ongoing threats from outside Hawaii. And we thought that was going to be the end of it, but it actually marked the beginning of non-stop news reporting, features, you know, lighthearted, heavy-hearted, breaking news.
Yes.
Okay, I'm hoping, yeah, I shared with you some pictures of really just looking back at these events.
We gotta flash that.
And being able to meet certain people, like the governor of Hawaii. I never realized, you know, someone like him. We would actually approach him, you know, really easily more easy than the mayor of Honolulu. That's just my opinion. But you know, they're all great people, and we also got to cover some milestone events regarding a famous TV series here, and we also
Hawaii 5-0
reached. Yes, and you know what? Just for the record, just for everyone's awareness, this weekend, I think it was last night, was their final episode of the rebooted version. I think I got that recorded here. So you know, no one expected to have a run of 10 seasons. I think 10 seasons, and yeah, it's a remarkable achievement. But so we're looking forward to other TV series that's going to be produced here, movies to be produced here. That's what a lot of people here are looking forward to. So it's when this all blows over, no doubt everyone's going to go out and about and strive to bring things back to normal here in the Aloha State.
Thank you so much for your time and happy anniversary. Of course, I wouldn't forget our first stories and features. Thank you so much for your effort, Hawaii Bureau. And Eagle News International wouldn't be Eagle News International without you guys. Thank you so much.
And happy, I guess, belated anniversary to my counterparts in Europe. I think we all started about the same time, but I give them credit that they went first. So I'm Alfred Asenes from Hawaii. We live in interesting times. Thank you.
Aloha.
In a new COVID-19 development, UN weather experts said on Wednesday that risks disrupting key forecasting services, including early warning alerts around the world. Both the quantity and quality of weather observations and forecasts, as well as atmospheric and climate monitoring, are at stake, according to the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, in Geneva. Here's Lars Peter Richogard, director of WMO's Earth System branch. Watch this.
We are concerned about the impact on the ability of our members to deliver their basic weather and climate services. And you may think, why would we care about this? We have bigger things to worry about right now. But even in this situation, there could be situations where all of a sudden you would be critically relying on weather forecasting if a hurricane, a tornado, or some other adverse weather situation breaks out.
Many parts of the global weather monitoring system are automated, such as satellites and many observation points on land. But other monitoring points have already seen a dramatic impact over the last few weeks. This includes readings from airplanes. Thanks to plummeting levels of air traffic, particularly in Europe, there has also been a significant decrease in data from developing countries where many observations are still taken manually, WMO said. In a statement, Secretary General Petteri Talas urged governments to support their national early warning and weather observing capacities despite the COVID-19 crisis.
The humanitarian crisis in Africa's Central Sahel region is spiraling out of control, with more than 5 million people facing severe food insecurity across the region. Now, that is according to a new joint food security assessment released on Thursday by food security partners, including the UN's World Food Program. Let's listen in.
For the lean season, the upcoming months, June to September, the analysis concluded that we are going from 10.8 million people declared food insecure last year, 2019, to 19.1 million people in 2020. This is an increase of 77% from last year, and it's unprecedented.
We need to limit the number of people that gather, so we need to fragment the number of sites of distribution. The maximum numbers vary from one country to the other, but in general, not more than 50 people can be gathered. And even when those people can be gathered, we are implementing standard operating procedures to minimize the transmission of the disease. So there's a temperature check for all people coming into the distribution sites. And we have to respect 1 meter between every individual coming to get the food assistance. Some of the bigger companies, and indeed the main suppliers globally, are in countries that are currently under strict confinement and a very reduced level of production. A lot of the nutritious products are produced in India or France, for example, where factories have had to reduce or close or reduce significantly their production. We have big concerns on this, and our supply chain colleagues, together with UNICEF, are looking at locally available enriched foods to complement this.
The dramatic spike in the number of hungry people comes at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic is spreading into fragile countries in the region, home to the weakest health systems anywhere in the world. Burkina Faso, which has seen the largest number of officially reported coronavirus deaths anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, is where the number of food insecure is expected to more than triple to 2.1 million people as the lean season sets in June. Chris Nikoy, WFP's regional director for West Africa, described it as a crisis layered on top of a crisis, noting that people are simply living on the brink and we must step up now to save lives. We are the only hope for the millions, he said.
Australian community groups use social media to help medical workers and those in isolation amid the new coronavirus outbreak across the country, packing meals and offering support networks in Melbourne. Watch this.
We can't help them do their jobs because we are not skilled, but I can do their grocery shopping for them, and I can offer to babysit my brother's kid when he has to pick up an extra shift or something like that. It seems to be working really well, and it's booming. The group is growing so quickly.
It also makes me feel good, because I think that's important, to feel good when you're doing something for the community, because then you do a better job, I think.
I'm overwhelmed by everything, especially the support we're getting from the community, the messages I'm getting every evening from people who have actually received the food, just thanking us, especially the nurses who are literally sending me messages, and you can feel the pain that they're going through, looking after people and everything.
At the Circolo Hospital of Varese in Lombardy, robots are replacing doctors and nurses in some duties in the fight against coronavirus.
Il robot ci aiuta a monitorare alcuni parametri clinici del paziente, tra cui per esempio frequenza cardiaca, respiratoria, saturazione, pressione arteriosa, ma anche la meccanica respiratoria. Sono un ausilio che non si stanca, che non può prendere infezioni, che non va in malattie. Sappiamo che molto il personale medico, il personale infermieristico è stato colpito in maniera dura da questa infezione e il fatto che il robot non possa essere affetto da Covid è una grande conquista.
Attraverso questa tecnologia si riesce insomma a comunicare e relazionarsi col paziente a distanza. Ovviamente questo non è che toglie la necessità di avere il rapporto umano, è chiaro che è fondamentale nell'assistenza al rapporto umano.
They enable remote monitoring thanks to their camera, which means medical staff do not have to physically go into the room, thus limiting the use of protective equipment and saving time. The child-sized robots are wheeled into rooms and left by a patient's bedside. Doctors can look after others who are in more serious conditions. They monitor parameters from equipment in the room, relaying them to hospital staff, and the robots have touchscreen faces that allow patients to record messages and send them to doctors.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for helping me out. And that's the news for tonight. I'm Alma Angeles.
And I'm Jeffrey Angeles.
And we live in interesting times.